So hello everyone, welcome to this another video of Scale Up India. In this video we are going to discuss about optional class in Java. Now optional class is one of again the most important features of Java 8 and this is one of the commonly used features. And before we discuss what is an optional class, let's try to understand why do we need an optional class in the very first place. So here we have a code in front of us where we have a method fetch employee details. Now within this method, I'm invoking another method that is get employee by ID. Now since this is just a PPT, so I made the method here itself. Now here we are going to provide the employee ID and then let's assume that it will contain some code to fetch the employee details from the database. Now database can be anything and this code can be anything. That's not our concern as of now. The important thing is we will pass an employee ID and this is going to return us an employee. Now after this, we will be saving the employee in this employee variable and then we are going to print the name of the variable. Now let's assume that the employee exists in the database and we have executed the code. Now in that case, we will be getting some output like this. The name of the employee, that is Abhishek Verma, with ID as 10. But what if employee doesn't exist? In that case, we are going to have a null pointer exception because this employee is null here, and whenever we try to perform a get operation on this null, we will be getting a null pointer exception. So this is the very first reason that we need to go for optional class in Java. Now some of you may say that okay, that's not an issue, like why do we still need to go for an optional class? We can write the same code something like this. So first of all, we can check whether employee is not null. If it's not null, then only we will print the name, else we can say employee not found. And in this case, the code is going to work fine. If the employee doesn't exist, it will say employee not found, else it will say the name of the employee. Now this is fine, but the problem is that these null checks are not the main part of the business logic. Also, it doesn't sound good here, like when we read this particular kind of code, because here we are assuming that whenever we are going to invoke this method get employee by ID, then we will surely get an employee here. Now why do we get something like this null here? So for this we need to apply some extra checks, and this is going to increase the length of the code also, and also this is not much readable. Hence this is again one of the reasons that we need to go for optional class in Java. And still, if you are not convinced with me, then the short answer is that not using optional class or not learning about the optional class is not a choice now. The reason is that now we are working with streams. So streams, as you know, that we learnt about this in our last video itself, and streams were introduced in Java 8. Now you know that there are so many benefits of the stream. This is going to make your code look better, simple and short also. But the problem is that with this stream itself, there are some methods, and in our last video also, if you remember, we discussed that there are some methods which are going to return you optional object, not the object itself, like find first, find any, maximum, minimum, and then there are many more methods. So let's assume that you don't learn about optional. Then how can we use these kinds of output in our code? Not only streams, beside this also there are too many APIs in Java. One of the other common is Spring Data JPA. So we are going to learn about this when we will be start learning about Spring Boot. So then we will be having a whole set of videos. Now there also we will see that Spring Data JPA helps us in order to connect with the database, and then we don't need to write some lengthy methods in order to get the data from the database. But the problem is this also provides us a method which are going to return you optional of object, not the object itself. And hence the thing is that not learning optional class is not a choice. We need to surely learn about optional. Then it is your choice whether you wish to write your methods using optional or not. But at least one should have a basic idea of optional. So now let's try to understand the same with the help of a code in our IDE. So here we are, and let's move on with our demo 0. So here let me first explain you the scenario. So this is our entity class, and in this class if you see we have an employee. The employee is having an ID which is an integer, a name which is a string, and then marks which is again an integer. Then we have a default constructor, then we have a parameterized constructor, some getter methods, and a toString method. Beside this we have a utility class here where we are going to have a method which is going to provide a list of employees. Now this is going to provide us almost like 6 employees, and that is fine, so that we don't need to write the whole list again and again, and anytime whenever we wish to use, we can utilize this method. Now let's move on to our demo1.java file. Now here in the main method we are invoking a method fetchEmployee by marks, and we are passing the marks as 60, and whatever is the output we are going to print here. Now in this method, as you can see, currently it is just returning null. There is no body and we need to write that. So let's see what they want. So they say fetch the list of employees using generator util.populate employees, which means we need to make usage of this method and get a list here first of all. So let's do that. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this and paste it here, and then I'm going to say Ctrl+Shift+O so that it imports the same. Now they say iterate over this list. So before that, let's save it somewhere. So I'll say here list of employee, and then I'll say employee list, something like this, and again say Ctrl+Shift+O so that it gets imported. Now they say iterate over the list, so let's do the same. So we will say here for loop, and let's say employee, and let's refer it by small employee, and iterate over this employee list, something like this. After iterating, they say that whatever is the first employee whose marks are same as the given marks, we need to return that particular one. So let's see how we can do this. So we will say if employee, so here we have our employee dot get marks equals the given marks. Then we are, let's say we are going to fetch that employee first. Either we can return the employee here itself, or we can fetch and then return the employee. So that's our choice. So let's return the employee directly here. So we will say return employee, something like this. And what if there is no employee with marks as the given marks? Then it will just iterate over the whole for loop, and at the end it is going to return null. I mean, we need to return something from here. So this is looking fine. Let's say Ctrl+Shift+F so that it gets formatted, and now we can run our code. So let's execute, and before that let's see, do we have this employee? So here you can see first is 1055, and then we have 2 employees with marks as 60, but we are just going for the very first one. So it is going to return us John, and we will just move out because we just need a single employee. So now let's execute this code of demo1 and see Java application and something like this. Now in executing, we will get this output: employee, the ID of employee, name, and marks, because we have overridden the toString method. So now we have got an output, and now let's do something more here. So we will copy this and again paste it here only, and now we are going to provide the marks as 66. Now let's see what it will do. First of all, let's check. So currently there is no employee with marks as 66. So you can guess what is going to be the output here. So I'll say demo1 and execute it again. Now you can see for the very first one it is returning me the output, but for the second one it is printing me null here. Now we are not getting an exception here, we are just getting null because we have not applied any getter method or any other method over this employee object, and hence that is fine. So this is one way of writing the code. Now let's do the same thing but with the help of streams in Java. So for this we'll go to demo2 and let's see how we can write the same code but using streams this time. So again, let me just copy a part of code here. So I'll copy this one, say copy, and let's paste it out here. So we'll paste here. Now let's convert it to stream first. So here I'm saying as stream, and now we need to filter the employee with marks same as the given. So we know we have a method as filter. Now if you don't know about all these methods, then that means that you should watch our previous video on streams API. There we have explained all these things in detail, that how this stream works, what is filter and what all, how does it takes a particular input. So now we know it is going to take your employee, and upon the employee it is going to be like a kind of a predicate. So we will say employee dot get marks here, and let's make it equals to 60. So this is the one. Now after this we say that we just need to get the very first employee, not all the employees. So here we will say find first. So this is the one, and let's save it. So now this is going to be the code. Whatever we were writing here in almost like 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 lines, same thing we can now write a single line here, something like this. But still the point is we need to return it. So let's return it from here itself. So we will say return, and now we don't need something like this. So that's gone here. Now the point it is giving us some kind of error, and the error is cannot convert from optional of employee to employee. So issue is, as I said you, that if you are not going to use an optional, then you may say that okay, I won't use optional, it is my choice. But the problem is, if you will use stream, there it has some method like find first, which are not going to return you the object as it is, but they will return optional of object. So as of now we don't know anything about optional. So what we will do is, here only in the return type we will just write whatever it says. So here we will say optional, something like this, and let's make it like this. So optional itself is a generic class in Java. So we have written like this, optional of employee. Now let me execute this and see the output here. So now you see the output is not employee, the output is an optional employee. So this is optional here first of all, and within that we have an employee. So here you can assume that optional is a kind of a box, or it's a kind of a wrapper upon your object. Now let's do the same with marks as 66 like we did the last time, and see what kind of output we will be having here. So let me just save it and execute the same. Okay, so I'm executing, but oh, what happens? 66 is not the, okay, my bad. I just hard coded it here as 60, so I need to make it as marks. Now this should be working fine. So let me execute it again, and now you can see for the first one we are getting optional of employee, and for the second one we are not getting null or optional of null. We are getting output as optional of empty. So this is something which we need to learn, that first of all how we can get a value out of this, how to deal with something like this optional of empty, and what more things we can do with this optional. Now as I said that not learning optional is not a choice, so we need to learn it, and we also need to learn how to use it and what are the benefits it is going to provide us, and all these things we are going to learn in our upcoming demos. But before this, let's try to understand what is optional with the help of our PPT. Now let's talk about what's an optional class. So we have already seen the code, but now let's go deep and see what do we mean here by optional class and when it was introduced, obviously. So this optional class was introduced in Java 8, and it is also coming from java.util package. And what it is? So this optional class, as I mentioned you, it's just a kind of a wrapper, or you can say it's just a kind of a box around your object. Now since it is a kind of a box, we don't know that whether it is going to contain some value, or it can happen that box is going to be empty in nature. And the benefit it provides us that it will handle those situations where the value is not available. this is not going to throw you null pointer exception at any point of time. Here with the optional class, we are going to have variety of methods using which not only we can handle those scenarios when value is not available, but we can also make our code look beautiful, short and crisp also. Now let's try to understand how this optional is going to work with the help of an animation. So here you can see this is almost the same diagram which I used in my video of stream also. So as you can see, we are having a source here with 3 numbers. Now this can be a list, it can be a set or anything. It can be even an array also. Then we are going to convert it to a stream with the help of a stream method. Then we will filter only those numbers which are even. And as you know, this filter is an intermediate operation. So if I will only put filter, it is not going to work. And hence at the end I'm saying I will be getting only the first number which is even, and this find first is a terminal operation. And like you just saw, it is going to return you an optional output. So in the sync, we will be getting some optional. So now let's run this. So on running, 1 goes and it gets filtered out because it's not even. Then 2 goes and it moves till this point. But in the output, we won't get the 2 as it is. We will get something optional of integer in our output. As you can see, here we have got a box here. And now on opening this box, we will be getting our output as 2. So this is how the things are going to work. But how we are going to open the box, that we will see again with the help of a code after some time. Now let's see what happens when the value doesn't exist. So again we have a same example, but this time our input is 1, 5 and 3. So now on executing this, you can see 1 will get filtered out, then 5 is going to get filtered out, and then 3 is also going to get filtered out. But still we will get something as optional in the output. So it won't happen that it is not going to return you any kind of output or it is going to return you null. It will give you something optional. Now on opening this particular box, we will get something like this. Some message which you get in your Google page generally, that better luck next time on scratching those reward coupons. But here again, we are not going to get something like better luck next time. Instead, we will be getting something like empty. Something which you saw earlier in our console, optional.empty. Now let's try to understand that how to get a value from this optional value. So we got something optional in nature. Now we need to fetch a value out of that optional so that we can use it like our other codes. So here we are with our demo 1, and let me again go through this scenario. So first of all, we have same entity class, nothing different. Then we have a utility class here. Now here you see that I have already created this method here only, fetch employee by max, and here I will be starting with this particular list. I'll convert it to a stream, then I will filter it out by the same marks given, and we will be getting a find first. Now the output is going to be optional of employee. So many of the times it may happen that you are writing a part of code, you need to interact with a code written by someone else, and the person is returning you an optional output. So person may not return you the exact thing as it is. The person will return you optional. Now this is also better because this time the other person or the coder is saying you that this method won't give you a surety that it will return an employee. It will return an optional of employee, which means it may or it may not return an optional of employee. And hence we say that it is going to make your code more readable also. Because this time when we read this, then itself we get an idea that okay, since this is an optional, so there is no surety on the output. Now let's see how we can utilize this. So here we are having our demo 1. So what we are doing is we are calling that same method, fetch employee by marks, and we are passing marks as 60. So whatever is the output that is optional of employee, we are saving here, and so that we can just see whatever the thing was returned, we are printing it here first of all. Now the point is that we need to get a value out of this, and before that, first of all, let's see what is the kind of output it is going to show us. So if I run it as a Java application, it will print me something like this: optional of employee, and then John with marks and ID, and then this get printed here. Now our first task is to get only this employee out of this optional box. So that is our task. Now for this, let's see what we can do. So we will copy this variable optional of employee and paste it here, and then since it is a class optional, so it will provide you multiple methods. Now again, this is not possible to learn all the methods, but in the video itself you will see all the important methods one by one along with the example. So that's the best part of this video, and hence in order to get more such videos on time, you need to subscribe the channel also. So here let's go for this method as get. So you see, this get is going to return you the employee. So that's cool. We just need a employee out of this. So we will just click on it, and the return of this is going to be an employee in nature. So let's save it first of all, and save it in a variable as employee, and then let's print the same. So we will say here sysout, and let's print the employee. So it will look like this. Again, a short and a simple code. Now on printing this, we will be getting output as employee. So you see, we were able to extract the employee object out of the box here. And now this is again like your simple code. So you can do this whatever you wish with this particular employee object. So that is fine now. Now let's move on with, or before moving on, let's do something. Let's make this marks as 66. Or let's see, yeah, the 66 will be fine, not 666. That's too much. Now what do you think what is going to happen when we say get here? Let's see. So here it will throw us no such element exception, because here you see it is going to print you optional.empty, and when you will perform a get operation on this, since there was nothing on inside the box, and on that nothing you applied a get method, so it is going to return you an exception. Obviously it is not going to be a null pointer exception, but it will say there is no element. And again you see it is more readable because it says no, there is no element, and it threw the exception itself. But we don't want this exception, so for this also we have something more after this. But let's revert it back to 60 here, so that this code again starts working fine. And now move on to our demo 2. Now in the demo 2, we are fetching the employee with marks as 95. Again we know we don't have any employee like this, and if you wish we can execute the code. So for this you see we will be getting like optional.empty. Now in this case, how we can utilize this or what we can do, let's try to understand here. So here they say fetch value from optional of employee, or else get employee from the default constructor, which means that if this employee is not available, then don't return null or no such element exception, but give us a default employee, which you can obviously generate with the help of this particular default constructor. So let's try to do the same here. So what we will do this time is, again first of all let's copy this. So we have copied, and let's paste it out here, and here in the output, instead of saying get, this time we will make usage of orElse. So this is my orElse here, something like this, and when I will hover over this, it will say that this orElse needs a particular employee object. So here we need to pass a 1, so we will say new of employee, something like this. This is the one. Now what will happen is that when we are going to execute this code, then either it will print the employee which is available here, I mean which was passed from this particular method, or else it is going to print this employee. So this is again same like you were saying, if employee is present then print, else Either you can throw some message or you can just return some different kind of employee. Both are fine. But with this orElse method, you can obviously pass employee only, not a message as such. That we will see separately, that how we can pass a message also. But as of now, let's print this employee, and before printing, let's save the employee here. So we have saved the employee, and let's print it with the help of a sys out here. So we will say employee, and on executing this, we will be getting output as 100. Now this employee was not available in our list, and also you can see the marks are not 95. So how we are getting? We are getting from this constructor. That's a default one, and as you can see, the default is Scale Up India. So this we have achieved. Now the next they say is that instead of providing this default constructor new of employee, you need to utilize the output which you will be getting from populate employee, which means this particular method. And again, that's not an issue because this method is again going to return you an employee only. So let's again code the same. So for this, let's go here and let me copy this code and paste it here. Like, you should not write each and everything on your own again and again. So we will just make it as employee 2, and this time instead of saying here new of employee, what we will be saying is we will say generator dot something like, or it was generator util dot, and let's say populate employee. So this is going to return you an object again. So let's execute the same. So this is the one, and let's execute it, and let me just fetch it here with me, console. So you can see again we have got the output, but there is one more way of doing the same, and the other way is that we have a method as orElseGet. Now on writing this method, you see this is not working anymore. Why? Let's try to understand that why this method is not working. So the reason is that in this method, you cannot pass an employee object as it is. Here you need to pass a supplier. Now if you remember, what's a supplier? Supplier is something which will never accept any input but will always return you something. So what we can do is we can say here brackets and then arrow, and we can make a lambda function out of this. So if you don't want to go for a lambda function, you make usage of orElse. If you wish to use something like this lambda function, or if you feel the code is a little bit big, like here we were making usage of this method as it is, but assume this method was not available. At the runtime, you need to provide some kind of logic. In those scenarios, this method is better as compared to orElse. Now this is giving us some error also, and this is not basically an error but a suggestion from SonarLint. So I'll make a separate video on SonarLint, but as of now, this suggestion which it says is that instead of using lambda for this, you can make usage of method reference. And method reference, as you know, when the same input is your output also. I mean, you are not performing anything different with your input. So here what I'll do is I will remove this, I will remove this, and here I will say double colon, so that now it will look like a method reference, and I will say Control Shift F here. Now this is a more better code, and we are also utilizing method reference this time. And if you don't know method reference, then you should watch the video on lambdas. So again, the same code is working fine. So now we are aware about three methods: get, orElse, and orElseGet. All these three methods are clear to us. Let's move on with demo 3 here and see what is there. So in the demo 3, they see that in case the optional employee is not available, then throw the error. So don't return the employee as it is, or don't fetch it from some other method and return, but throw the exception. So this also can be a scenario many a times. So let's see how we can do this. So again, as always, we will copy this optional of employee first, and we will paste it out here. And here let's see what all methods we are available to us. So we will try to go with that same orElse itself. So we will say orElse, and as you can see we have a method as orElseThrow. So this method is there with us, and it says if a value is present, it will return the value, otherwise it is going to throw no such element exception. So I'm purposely reading out these things sometimes so that you also get an idea that how to utilize a new method or how to get idea about a new method which you don't know. So let's double click on this, get this method, and in the output let's save it in the employee like as usual. So we will say employee here, then employee here, and let's save it. And now let's print the employee. Let's say sysout, and here we have our employee something like this. So let's say Control Shift O and Control Shift F. Now I know that it can throw me some kind of exception also this time. So what I'll do is I will write it in a try catch block quickly. So I will say here a try, and in the out here I will say a catch. Now I don't know what kind of exception it is going to throw. I don't remember what was that no such element exception. So I will just say exception and then this particular exception, and in the output like here I'm not concerned much. So what I will just simply do is I will say here sysout and I'll say exception as it is. So I will print the exception as it is. Later on when you are coding it actually in your business logic, then you can decide what you wish to do in such scenarios. So we will just say Control Shift O, Control Shift F, and let's execute this particular code. Now on executing this, you see that since we don't have any employee with marks as 95, the output is an exception, and the exception is no such element exception, and by default the message is no value present. So this is a by default message which you will be getting with this no such element exception. Now this time they say that if the optional employee is not available, then throw the same exception but with a different message. Now let's see how we can do this. So let's copy the same code first and print it here as it is, and now in the method itself, so what we will do is that here we will pass the exception, but let's try to see will it accept. First of all, the answer is yes, it can accept something. So here also the other overloaded method is with supplier argument. So you can have a supplier also here, and as again you know, supplier will never take any input and it will just return something. But this time you don't need to make usage of the throw keyword because already the throw keyword is available in the method itself. So you don't need to use it as such, and you just need to return the exception like you are creating a new one. So what we will do is we will copy the name from here. So let's copy the name, and in the brackets let's say this particular message, that is no employee is found, and let's say Control Shift O, Control Shift F. So this is also done, and now let's execute it again. So this time we are getting same exception but a different message, that is no employee found. And if you wish that okay, what if I don't want this exception, I want something different. So what if you want something, let's say arithmetic exception? I mean, it is possible, you can throw it on your own. Let's try to see, can we throw the same here also? So what we will do is we will just say arith and metic. So this is the one, and yeah, this is fine. So it's not a case that every time you need to throw this exception only. You can throw any exception, but the point is it should be an unchecked exception only. You cannot throw a checked exception from this. And again, if we execute the same, so you see now we are getting arithmetic exception with the message as no employee found. So this is also working fine for us. So now when we are clear with that how to get a value out of the optional, now we also want to see sometimes whether the value exists or not before getting the value. I mean, it's not a good practice that you directly get a value and then you decide that whether you wish to return a default value or you wish to return a particular kind of exception. What if we just want to see whether the value exists or not before fetching the same? Let's try to see. So for this, we will move on to our demo 2. And again, here everything is same. The entity class is same. The utility is also same. There is no difference. And let's move on to our demo 1 directly. So this time the top part is same. The marks as 60. And here they say, check if optional employee is present. So before getting, we need to check if the employee is present. Then if employee exists, we will print the value, else we will say no employee found. Let's try to do the same. So we will copy this variable and we will paste it out here, and we will say if, or let's say is present. So this isPresent method is going to return us a boolean value. So we have received it, and since it's a boolean value, we can keep it in a if brackets, something like this here. So we have done this particular thing, and now we can just get a value out of this. So we will say optional of employee, something this, and we can say get. Now even a get will work, because there is no chance that this time it can throw us some no such element exception. Otherwise it will never enter in this particular part of code. And what we can do is, let's directly print the value instead of saving first and then doing something different. Let's directly save, print the value as it is. So I'm writing a sysout on this, and in the else part, let's have a message with a sysout. Let's say that employee was not found. So we will just copy and paste it out here, Control Shift O, Control Shift F. I mean, this is just my habit that I put Control Shift O again and again, although you can just say Control Shift F to format the same. So now let's execute the code, and this time it says that in the isPresent part, the employee is going to be printed. I mean, there is nothing different, but the best part is that this time there will be no chance that it can throw you some kind of exception, because we are checking first hand itself that whether it is present or not. It is again like you are checking whether this is not equals to null. So that way. And what if we say something, let's say 66, then what will happen? Now in that case, it will directly move on to the else part, because now your isPresent is going to return you false. So it will say no employee found. Let's move on with the next part of it. So in the next one, they say do the reverse of it. So instead of saying is present, we are now more concerned about whether it is empty or absent. So we want to check that particular thing. And in order to check that, what we will do is, first of all, we will say optional of employee, and then we will say the method is empty. So it is not is false or is absent. The method is empty. Now this method, as you can see, it was introduced in Java 11 onwards. So if you are working with Java 8, 9 or 10 currently, then you won't see this kind of method. It will work in 11 onwards only. So we will go for this is empty, and rest of the logic I wish I could have copy pasted here. So let me just write something like this, and here what I wish is I will just copy paste this particular thing as it is, and this time in the else part I will just do it like I'll copy this line, I'll paste it out here. So you see, almost like there is not any much difference that why should we go for is empty. I mean, you can say that okay, for such scenario I can just put a not here itself in the starting if I want to perform something like that. But the point is that if Java itself is providing you the method, then why not to use the same and learn about it. So at least we should have a basic idea. And again, if we execute, since this time there is no employee with marks as 66, so it will go to no employee found because it is empty. Otherwise it will, if I say as 60 and then I execute the same code here, so it will return me the employee in both the cases and print the same. So this is the way that we can check the value before accessing the value. Now let's move on with our demo 2. Few more ways of doing the same thing. So this time also you see it is almost the same. They say check if value is present. If exist, then print the value. So you will say that okay, we have just done the same thing, then why to do the same thing again? But you see this time I'm saying here if present. So that means a new method is going to appear here. So let's copy and see what benefit it is going to provide us. It's always better to have idea of all the methods and then you can decide on your own which is better. So this if present method, the first one, is going to take a consumer. Now consumer, as you know, it always accepts the thing and it will never return something. So we will say if present and we will just say employee. So code will come here only if the employee is available. And what we wish to do is we wish to say sysout. I mean, we cannot return from this. That's the point here. Now if I say employee and I will remove these semicolons, Control Shift F, and on doing this you will see your output will look something like this, if present. Now you will say I could have done the same thing earlier also, but yeah, this is the way. So the difference between this first one and the second one is that when you do is present, now you have an option to return also something from here. And this is generally we use when we have multiple lines of code and we wish to return something if the data is present. This if present we use when we are sure that we are not going to return anything and instead we are just going to consume something. Let's say you just want to do a sysout or you just want to set some values, then if present is better. So always you cannot replace is present with if present, because here if I will ask you to return me the employee after performing some kind of operations, then it is not possible for you because it's a consumer. And again it shows this blue line because it says that you can do the same thing with the help of method reference. And you see how helpful is this sonar lint. I wish I'll make a video on this for you specifically, but for that obviously you need to like this video first, you need to share it with your friends and provide me more subscribers so that I can help you guys also. So now this is the way it can look like just with the help of a method reference. Now with the second one they say that if value is present, because here you see that if I will pass it something like 66, then let's say what it will do. So in this case if I say 66, then it won't print anything. I mean, it will simply ignore the things as if there was nothing available, which is fine also. But what if I want to say that if it is not present, then print no employee found. Now for this, instead of making usage of this, what we can do is we have another method which is like if present or else, and it is going to take two arguments. First is a consumer and second is a runnable here. So let's go for it. For this consumer part we have already done, and runnable, as you remember, that also will never accept anything, something like this, and also it is not going to return you anything. So here we will just say sysout. Runnable, if you remember, that is the parent of thread class, and with that we were having that particular start method or the run method with us, and we used to have something like multi-threading with that. So it is same runnable. So here it is, and let's say no employee, and we will say this found here. Now since I need to scroll, let me just say Control Shift F here. And why is it throwing me some exception? Okay, this is the reason of error. So let's say Control Shift F, and now this again looks fine. So this time if I execute it, so for the first one you see when data was not available it didn't made anything, but for the second time it said no employee found. But here also the point is you cannot return anything from this. It is just a kind of a consumer. So this is again done, and now let's move on with the next part. So till now we know that how to fetch a value from the optional. We also know how to check whether to see if the value exists or not. But what if we need to generate an optional value? Then how we can do the same if someone asks us to provide us a optional value to generate an optional value? Then how to do the same? Let's see in our next code. So here we are with our demo 3, and with this again we have almost the same entity class, same utility class without any particular change, and we have 3 demos. Let's go with our demo 1. So here they say create a new employee generated from generator util dot populate employee. So yeah, that's good. So what we can do is we can say employee something like this, and we can make usage of this generator util. So let me just copy this and paste it out here and say something like this. So I have made it, but they say that you need to make it as an optional employee. Things are not going to be that easy, because this time the scenario is you need to make it as an optional employee, which means that you can't go for this variable. I mean, variable is fine, but just in order to make it more relatable, let's call it as optional of employee. And here also let's try to say optional. So here I will say optional something like this, and I will just say Ctrl Shift O. This is fine. But the problem is I can't save this populate employee as it is, because this populate employee is going to return me employee. I wish to save it as optional of employee. Now again, you can't ask other person that okay, always return me optional only, because now I have learned that how to fetch a value out of optional. So just do that. Again, this is not possible. We should also learn how to create an optional value. So for this, what we can do is we can say optional dot off. So this off is a static method, this one, and then yeah, something like this we can do. So just we will just say here something like this, and Ctrl Shift O, Ctrl Shift F. So this is a way we can generate a optional value. Now let's see that how to print the same and do other things. So for this, what I'm feeling is I'm feeling a little lazy, so I'll just go back to my demo 2, and what I'll do is I'll go for this one and I'll copy this one. I mean, that is fine. Why to write the whole thing again and again? So I'll paste the same thing here. That's the benefit of using almost the same names, and it's a good practice. So we will say Ctrl Shift O, Ctrl Shift F. Now this looks fine also. And now let's execute it, and on executing it says that okay, it's an employee and something like this, because we have printed the value out of this. So now this looks good. Now with the second one, they say that again do the same thing, but then what's the benefit? I guess I forgot to add something here. Let's change the scenario. Create a new employee, but not using this, with value as null. I mean, it may happen sometimes that the other method, like here we are sure that this method is always going to return us something. But what if this method itself returns us null? Then what? So let's try to see that also here. Or if you wish that okay, this is not good, so what we can do is we can create something like this populate employee 2 here, and let me just go for this one. So this is my populate employee, and this is the other one, populate employee 2. And here let's say that sometimes there is a scenario that it can return you null. Now you will say that okay, this is a cheating. How will it return null? Because someone else has made, so they may return null here. Yeah, it is possible. So, and this time we need to utilize this. So you will say okay, no worries, copy this. Since we have optional, so this is going to work fine. So we have copied, and this time let's call this populate employee 2. Let's see what it will do now. And here also let's call it as optional employee 2. Here also let's say optional employee 2. Everything is fine. So since this time it is going to be null, so it will be empty, and we are assuming it will go for something like this. Let's see. So we go for this, and okay, it didn't said no employee found. It said a null pointer exception. Why so? Because it said that optional can provide you something, it may not provide you something. But the point is, with this off, you need to ensure that it will never get here something like a null. So this of should not get something like a null here. It should be a non-null always. It cannot return you optional of null or optional of empty. So that is not good. So if this cannot return us, then how we were getting optional of empty till now? Like how that magic was happening till now everything was fine. Sometimes we used to get value, sometimes we didn't used to get a value. But if we go for optional dot off, it will just throw the error in such scenarios. So how to do the same thing? Let's see in our demo too. But I hope this is clear that with optional dot off, you can generate an optional value, but it will give you the error, or you can say it is going to provide you a null pointer exception when you will try to pass a null here, because it asks you that okay, be ensure that always this should be an employee, returns an optional describing the given non-null. So this value cannot be null in nature. So let's go for this demo 2 here. And what we will do is we will just copy the previous one. So let's copy this thing here, copy, and we will just paste it out here, and here let's make it as optional employee 2. So this is the one with ofNullable, and this is the method here guys, ofNullable. This is a different method again for generating optional in nature. Let's see how this is going to work, and let's say Java application. So here the output looks same. So when we are passing the value, the output looks same here with ofNullable also. Then what's the difference? Let's try to do the same with populate employee 2 also. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it out here, and this time I'll say populate employee 2, and here also let me say 2, here also let me say 2. Now you remember that last time when I did the same with the help of off, it gave me a null pointer exception. Let's see what ofNullable will do. So here if I execute, this time it says no employee found, because this ofNullable says that it returns an optional describing the given value. So if value exists, then it will provide the optional of it. If a non-null value or it's an empty, let's say, then it will say you optional.empty. So this is the one which used to give you optional.empty. So you can learn both of them. This you can utilize when you are always sure that value is not going to be null at any point of time. And this you can utilize when you are not sure value may or may not be null in nature. So this is the working of ofNullable. So now let's see another way of generating an optional value. So we'll go for this demo 3, and here they say create a new employee using null. So it may happen that initially you don't know that this was the way to generate an employee and this was not available. So let's copy this, let's paste it out here, and what we will do in that case. Now if you don't know this, so by default I guess you will say null because we are not aware of the value, and let's say Control Shift O. So this is looking fine now. Let's execute it, and on executing this we will get an exception. That's a null pointer exception, because this is the way if you will pass a null here, that's simple, the null will appear here, and on this null if you will call ifPresentOrElse, so it will for sure give you a null pointer exception, because here you are not saying that you are putting a optional box upon your null, you are directly saying that that box itself is null in nature. So this is not a good way. So in such kind of scenarios, when you are not sure with the values, what we can do is we can, instead of using null here, let me first make it optional employee 2 so that it stops giving the compilation error. So instead of saying this, we can say optional dot empty. So this is the one we can utilize here, optional dot empty. And now if I will run the code, first of all let me just comment this, otherwise it won't move ahead. So let me just execute it now. So it will say no employee found. So this is the way. So if you are not sure of the value, you can say optional dot empty. Now when you are fully sure, you can say optional dot off. If you are not sure whether value may or may not be available, then you can say optional dot ofNullable. So these are the three ways of generating the optional value on your own. Now let's move on with the next part. So now when we are sure that how to generate an optional value, how to fetch an optional value, how to see whether the optional value exists or not. Now let's try to see what are the various kinds of operations which we can perform on these optional values. And yeah, there are too many operations. Let's try to learn them. So here we are with a demo 4 and let's see what all we have here. So first of all, we'll go to this entity. So this time there is a new class as address. So let's see. So this address is a very simple class containing ID an integer, city as a string, a default constructor, parameterized constructor, two getters and a toString method. This is my employee class, and now you see an employee can have an address, but the point is employee can have an optional address, which means an employee may or may not have a home. So this may be a scenario that employee has shifted to some other city in order to work. Initially on the day 1 itself, the employee is not going to have a flat or a PG or something like this. So what he will do in that particular case, he or she. So here we have this particular default constructor, and like you just learnt, so we are saying optional dot of, and here we have this particular method as populate address, which is going to provide us the address. So this is the way we are providing an address to it using optional dot of, we just now learned. If you wish, we can say nullable also, but currently I'm sure it will always provide me some address object, so I'm going for it. Now there are two ways of creating parameterized constructor. One way is you can say that we are going to pass the address object and then we will be converting it to optional dot of address, because as you know, this address variable is optional, so you can't save it directly. So we will be saying optional dot of address. So this is one way. Another way of doing the same thing is that in the argument itself you can say optional address. So this time whenever someone will invoke new of employee, that time itself they will come to know that okay, we need to pass some address, and it can be an optional address. So either they will give you something like optional dot of the address value, or they may say optional dot empty. Any of them is fine, and this time you can assign it directly. So this is completely your choice, hence I have made both of them. Then these are the getter methods, a toString method, and here I'm utilizing also both of these methods. So I'm doing it in this way. So with the first employee, I'm saying optional dot of and I'm passing the address. Now for the second one, I'm saying optional dot of nullable, and then I'm again passing the address. So I can utilize of also, I can utilize of nullable also. Both of them are fine in nature, because there I'm saying it is going to accept an optional of address. Then with optional of nullable, I can pass a null also. This is allowed. Then I can pass even something like this, or let's do something that here let's not pass this of nullable, and here let's say we are not going to pass something like this and we are going to make it as null. So with of also, let's see what will happen when we will pass. Last time we saw it will provide us something like a null pointer exception. Then we can say optional dot empty also if we don't have any address instead of saying null. And the last way is we can directly pass an address. So any of the values you can use of, you can pass value, you can pass null. You can use of nullable, you can pass value, you can pass null. You can use optional empty, or you can directly pass on the address, because we have another constructor which will directly accept the address. So it is as per the business logic, but we are concerned whether this will work or not. Not sure. Let's check it out. So here we have our demo 1, and let's say what this demo says to us. So here it says that first of all we will be getting an employee with marks as 60, and that will be printed here. Then it says filter this employee and check whether the person has address or not. So only get the employee if the person is having an address. So let's see how we can do this. So we will say optional employee. Now one way of doing the same is you will say that we will first get the value. After getting, we will see whether the person is having address or not, and then accordingly we will move ahead. But this is optional, so it is going to provide us many more ways. Let's see. So we will just say optional employee. Now it is a kind of a filter. Last time you learnt the filter method with string. The point is, with this also you can provide the same filter, which is going to accept a predicate in nature. So we will say filter. Now it will have an employee, something like this, and then we need to check whether the address is there or not. So we will say employee dot get address, something like this. And you know that in the filter we need to have something like a boolean output. So we know it's an optional, so we will just say is present. So we will just filter if the person is having an address. If the person is not having an address, we are not going to move ahead. And then they say that if exists, then print the value, else don't. So after this itself, or let's do something. First of all, let's save it here. So let me copy this, let me paste it this something here and say optional employee 2. And now let me show you how this output will look like. So we will just go here, we will say optional employee 2 here. And then they say if exists, then print the value, else say no employee found. So what I'll do is, again I'm feeling lazy here, so I'll go for this one. I'll copy this particular statement and I will paste it out here after this optional of employee 2. So this statement should work fine for me. So this is the one. Let's go back here. Now let's execute the code. And this is Java application. Let's say okay. So this time it didn't even executed it at all. And before that itself, it said there is some null pointer exception. And now in order to understand, we will say we first of all called it in Java line 11 here. Then we went to generator util line number 35. And then we went to this line number 20 here. And this is the reason. So as I said you, off cannot contain a null. So this is not allowed. We need to pass an address here, or we need to make it ofNullable. So ofNullable it ignored, but here it gave an error. So that is not allowed. So let's make it as 4, something which I wanted to show you out here, that this is not going to work. So let's make it as New Delhi. So this is the one. So Kolkata is there, New Delhi is there, Chennai is there. Bangalore is left, but instead of it we can make Chandigarh as another hub, if that's fine. But let's see. Now let's execute the same code and see the output. So this time you see that when I say this one, optional employee, so it prints me employee, ID 129, name is John, marks as 60. Now this John was not having an address, it is null. So for the address part it said optional.empty. So this got printed. Then I filtered this one, filtered the employee on the address. Since address is not there, so nothing got saved in this optional employee 2, and the output is optional.empty. And upon this, when we executed this statement, you know, it will say no employee found. So this is the one. And this way we can again put something like a filter. Now you may have a question that what if we don't have an employee here itself in the very first hand, something like 66. In that case, it must give you something like optional.empty. And on that empty, if we will say filter, it will give us some kind of exception. Let's check out. So we will go here, and this is the way it is going to work. So even if this optional.empty is there, then also it won't give you any kind of exception. Inherently, it will first check whether this thing is there or not, and accordingly it will work. Since there is no input here, so this optional employee 2 automatically becomes optional.empty. So you don't need to apply explicitly if present or is present or something like that. Directly you can say filter. So this will work fine now. Again, let's make it 60. And what I was thinking here is that, I don't want to use it here as such. Like now there is no need of it for this one. So what if we can directly utilize it here. I mean, why to save it if I don't want to use it explicitly? So Control X, and here I will say Control V, and I can ignore these two, and I can say Control Shift O, Control Shift F. So it will look something like this. Or in order to make it more readable to you, we can do it like this: dot, and then again let's say a dot, and okay, this dot was there, so let's call it like this. So this is again more readable. Again, you see, it's like a kind of a pipeline, not with the string but with optional. So with your optional also, you can have your this kind of a pipeline. That's the point here. But this will also give you an optional, so it's not like a terminal non-terminal methods. Here everything will work fine. So this is again a good feature. With simple null checks, you were not able to do something like this. Let's move on with the next demo, guys. Here, so now they say map name of optional employee and save in optional name. So we will just perform step by step. So we just want to get a name out of this. So we will say this optional employee here, and we will say map here. I just want the name, so there is a map function. Again, you learned that map function was there in the streams, so it is available here also, and it will take a function argument. Function, you know, it can accept anything. Currently it will accept employee, and it can return you anything. So currently it is going to return an employee dot name. So we will just say here get name, something like this, and the output is going to be optional of string, because now it has converted employee to a particular string. So let's write it out here and say it's a string for us. And the thing is, they are saving it an optional name, so let's save it like this one. And they are also asking us to print. So for printing, let's just print out as it is, because currently we just want to study that how this looks like. Later on we will try to make it even more shorter or with some other way. So yeah, this we have done. Let's print and see what it is going to do. So on executing, it says optional of John. So from optional of employee, it converted, or it we can say it mapped it to optional of John. And now we can again perform this operation, if present or else, on this one. So after this statement, we can say optional name, and then we have something like this with us: no employee found. Rest of the things are same, hence I have copied it. So it says, yeah, John is there. And what if it is not there? So will it give me any kind of error? The answer is no. Let's see. So here itself nothing will come, because what it is going to map if there is nothing. So this is the way here, guys. It will remain as optional dot empty. Let's make it 60 again and save it, execute it. Now they say okay, we can make it shorter since it is an employee and we are getting the name as it is. So how we can do? So we don't need something like this, but if we don't need, then how we will call it? So if you remember, there was one more way of method reference. We can do it by the class name, even if it is not a static method. So we can do it like this. Again, the details are there in the video of Lambda. There only I have explained about method reference in the end, so you can watch the same. So this is the way of it, and currently we wish to learn the things, we want to print them step by step, hence we are doing this. Otherwise, if you wish, you can just make a chain of it. First you can say map, and upon that you can directly say if present or else. No need to save it first and then move further. So this should work fine. Let's move with demo 3. So in the demo 3, it says map address of employee. So let's do the same, there is no issue. So we will just copy out this and we will just paste it out here. The same way we did for the name, we can do for the address also. Yeah, fine. So we will say it's an optional of address, and here instead of a string it will say optional of an address something, and here instead of saying get name, let's say address, something like this. And here also let's change it to address. Yeah, this is fine. Control Shift O. But the problem is it's not saving the same. Why? Because here it says cannot convert from optional of optional address. Okay, yeah, that was fine. If you remember, we were not getting address here. We were getting optional of address. So it is not, output cannot be optional of address. Output is optional, and then we were having one more as optional, something like this. So this was the case, and for that purpose let me here also call it as optional of optional address. So this is the one. Now there may be some other ways that you can say we can get a value out of it, but I want to show you something different here. So we won't go for any filter or anything else as of now, but after this. So yeah, so here we got, and they say that okay, for this 60 this is empty. Then let's go for some other employee for which we can get an address. So we'll go here and let's say 10. So with 10 we should be getting some kind of output. Let's execute the code again. Yeah, now we got optional, but then we again have an optional, and then we have an address. So it is like box within a box, and then you have an item. So this is the one. So this is our item but wrapped in a box, and that box itself is available in another box. So let's bring the item out of the first box. So how we will do this, and deliberately I'm doing it step by step so that we can understand. So this is the thing, and out of this we just want to get optional of address. So we will say map something here, and on this we will say address, and we will say address dot get. So this is the one, guys. It will look like this, and now let's save it, and this time as you can see this will return me optional of address. So I will copy the first one, I will paste it here, I will remove this one optional from this, and from here also I will remove the outside one, something like this it will look now. And let's print the same thing again so that we can see how the things are proceeding step by step instead of jumping on directly. So now it looks like this, and this also they say you can make it short, but how we can replace with the address we were not having get method was there with optional, if you remember. So we can see here optional, and then we can see this colon, and we can say get. The same thing I did in my video of lambda with the help of string. So it is the same thing. So now let's execute, and yeah, now out of optional employee we got optional of optional address, and then we found an optional of address out of this. But things are not that simple. We still need to bring out the city out of it. So let's move ahead with the next part. So now we need to map a city from this optional address. So again we will say optional of address, something like this, and let's say map again, and we will say address, and let's say address dot get city, something this. And now the output is your optional of string. So let me just quickly copy this, paste it here, and see here optional of city, and yeah, this is a string for me, something like this. It's a string, and if you wish we can again print it out, something here, and this is your optional of city, how it looks like, something like this. And now if I execute, now you will get your optional of city, but still we didn't got the Chandigarh part only, so we again need to fetch the item out of it. So for this what I will do is I will copy the previous statement, this one, and instead of printing this, because we are no more interested in that, and we can directly try to say city here like this, and we know that city is in address only, so let's try to refer it like this, address, something this, and here it is something this. So this also looks fine. And now if we execute, finally we get Chandigarh out of all these things. So this is the way. And what if I say here like 0, we don't have any employee with marks 0, then what will happen? Will it throw any error somewhere? The answer is no. It will just keep on saying optional empty, optional empty. At the end it will say no employee found, even after the chaining. So let's make it again 10. Now you saw that how difficult it was. Even we were making usage of map, then also it was so difficult. And the best part is that still you can make a chain out of it. So let's quickly do that part also, how to make a chain from this. So first let me say like this. So what I'll do is I'll copy the same logic in the below and we will try to replace and see what chain can we do. So we don't want this anywhere, and let's try to utilize it directly like this. So this is done. Now we don't want anything like this here. Let's try to utilize this again directly. So we have done this, and now we again don't want anything like this. So let's utilize it directly. Something here. Let's see Ctrl Shift O, add F. So you see, first we mapped it to get an address. Then since it was an optional of optional address, we got the option of address. Then we got optional of city, and then we said that if present then print, else say no employee found. So using map, although it was possible, but it was too lengthy. Like there are so many things and it is going to be a little difficult. If I say that again that city is optional and then you need to map it with some different thing, it is going to become even more big. So for this there is a shortcut. The shortcut goes with your flatMap. So now let's try to learn about your flatMap here and how the same can work. So what we will do is we will copy this particular optional of employee, and this time, or let me just copy this whole thing and let's write it out here. Now this time, instead of saying map, let's say flatMap, something like this. So this flatMap basically is used to flatten your output. Now if you see how the things are going to appear is that it will directly return you an optional of address, which means it will directly return you this part directly. So this way it is going to work, and rest of the logic you can copy paste from here. So we have just copied and let's paste it out here as it is. So this way we can do. And now on executing this demo 4 with a Java application, it will say this kind of output for this because it is empty. Let's say with 10. So with 10, if I will execute same, it will print me the thing. So now you see with flatMap how simple it became. You were directly able to open two boxes at the same time. So the difference is that when you are making a map of the thing, then what it does is that whatever is your output, it will wrap it with an optional. But when you are making utilization of flatMap, then it will directly provide you the value as it is. Now you will say that if it will directly provide us the value as it is, then shall not we make usage of this flatMap every time? The answer is no. You should not use flatMap every time, because if we go back to our demo 2 where we were having get name, so it was just a string. So imagine if here you would have used a flatMap, it would have returned you directly string object. But sometimes we want to make usage like optional of string. So it is up to you, when do you wish to make usage of map and when do you want to usage of optional of or flatMap. So depending on the usage you need to decide. Things which you can remember is map will wrap the output with a box, flatMap will give you the output as it is, and accordingly you can decide which one to use. And if you wish, we can make it shorter also. So let's say sys out here, something like this. Let's say this one, and let's copy out all the things. So we will paste. Now I don't want anything like this here, So let me remove this particular part. Again, I don't need anything like this here, so let me remove this. And again, I don't need anything like this. Control Shift O, Control Shift F. So this is how you can make this code also simple with your flatMap. So this was the output of your flatMap. Again, if you remember, flatMap was there with your streams also. Let's move on with our next part, guys. So the next method is OR. Now they say map address of optional employee. So let me utilize this thing. So I will copy this logic first. So I'll copy this and paste it out here. And with 60, what kind of output will it give me? Let me just execute. So if I will execute it with 60, and what it says, okay, always save, let's say okay, yeah. So it will say me empty, but they say don't return empty if the address is not there, return something else. So here how can we say or else? Let's see. So after this, do we have anything like or else? Yeah, that is also there, or else. But instead of going for the whole or else, I mean that also, since you have already seen, so let's not go for it, and let's say or only. So this or method is also available, and this is again going to accept a supplier. So let's utilize this and see this one, and here let's, yeah, this is the method I wish to go for, generator util and this one. So this is the way here, guys, but there is still a problem, and the problem is that we can't utilize it directly. It should be an optional of address. So because this flat map will return us optional of address, so this should also return it optional of address. So let's make it optional dot off, and since I'm pretty sure that it will return me some output, I'm not using ofNullable. And let me just say here one more bracket in order to make it fine. So yeah, this is good. So when I'm saying if address is there, then get an address, otherwise just return me a default address. And now on executing this particular code, it will give me output as 100 and YouTube. So this is the default address of Scale Up India. So this we have achieved. And now the next of the things we can just copy from here itself. So we will just copy things here and we will just paste it out here as it is, and let's execute the code. So this is the way your code is going to again look like. Here we are making usage of OR method. You can go for or else also, and there you can pass on directly, but I just wanted to show you one more method like this or, which you can utilize. Or if you wish, you can utilize on flatMap also, as well as map also, and other things. So yeah, this is also done. Let's move on with our last but not the least demo. So till now we have been doing so many things, like on getting the output, we did a filtering, we did mapping, we did flat map, we used or, and so many other things. But this last one is interesting. It says that you need to convert it back to a stream. Now how can we convert an optional to a stream? Last time in the video of stream, you saw that we can generate a stream out of a list, we can do it from set, we can do it from map, we can do it from array or directly data. But how we can map it with an optional? So this thing was actually not available initially when Java 8 was created. This thing came since Java 9 onwards only, that you can get a stream out of your optional. So let's use this. So we will say it like this, and then we can say stream. It's that simple. So we'll just say stream and it will return me a stream of employee. Now since it's a stream, you can utilize stream methods. So we will just say for each. Like currently we are not going to do anything big. For the bigger things, you can watch our video again. So it's a kind of a loop. You can move on to that video now and you can see what all different operations we can do with the stream after this. So yeah, this is going to be your output, and if data exists, directly we can get a data out of this, like without any optional or anything. But here remember that since this optional will give you an optional of employee, So this stream means it can have either 0 or 1 output. 0 in the case when this employee doesn't exist. So then it will be a stream of 0 elements, and if item exists, it's a stream of 1 element. So this is the way we can go for our last method, and as I informed you that this method came in Java 9 onwards only. So if you are running the code with Java 8, it is not going to work anymore. So this is the guys, and I hope now you can appreciate the different things of optional class, and now you will try to learn it and utilize this in your code and make your code better instead of using those simple null checks. Thanks everyone.